Check out today's piece of fan art. It's Red Arcoade from Tsukihime and Melty Blood. As far as the remake's concerned, when Arc whips out the old granny skirt, she means business. I love the demented expression here. It's very fitting. Thank you so much, Seki. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun. Dai here. Today we're going to be critically analyzing one of Fate's most iconic memes. I assume most of you already know this, but for those who don't, there's a point in both the Fate Stay Night visual novel and Dean Stay Night anime where Shiro says the line, "People die when they are killed." No, this is not a mistranslation, but if you take it out of context, it seems incredibly stupid. It's funny because of how redundant it is. Killing, by definition, means causing someone else to die. If they don't die, then you can't really say you killed them, can you? The hilarity of this obvious statement has become a meme, not only in the community, but within Type Moon itself, with plenty of variations seen throughout other works like Tsukihime and El Malloy Case Files. Some of these variations actually subvert the original statement, making us wonder, do people really die when killed in Fate? For this video, I'm going to look into the meme through its proper context, and explore many of the weird ways death works in the Nasuverse to determine not just whether people die when killed, but also if they should. Let's start with the original context. Shiro says this iconic line during Saber's route, when he's considering giving Avalon back to Artoria. Throughout the story, Avalon has saved Shiro many times, reviving him from otherwise fatal wounds. For the final battle, though, he decides to give Avalon to Artoria so that she can use it in her fight against Gilgamesh. Doing so will deprive him of that precious healing he's been depending on thus far, but he's okay with it, because surviving those attacks was unnatural to begin with. As he puts it, people die when they are killed, and by relinquishing Avalon, he'll simply be living by that basic rule once more. These words aren't exactly Shakespearean, but they do work thematically for this route. When Shiro talks about not needing the Grail, he states that he can't, nor should he try to undo the past. As a survivor of Fuyuki's Great Fire, he knows he needs to honor the pain and mourning everyone has endured since then. When it comes to Artoria, she's been denying herself a second life, and even an afterlife, by trying to redo the selection of the king. He'd rather her take pride in her kingship and move on from the past. In other words, Shiro is simply pointing out the permanence of death, which we should all be familiar with. That's how things are in reality. Death is death, and once it happens, it can't be fixed. Perhaps one day we'll invent technology that can restore a dead person's body while still retaining their previous consciousness, but right now we can't. Life is precious because of how fragile it is, and death is one of our greatest fears. We fear closing the book on our own life, and we fear the sorrowful mourning that accompanies it. It's horrible whether you're the one dying, or if it's happening to a loved one. Turns out, the permanence of death is also a vital element of narrative drama. Compelling narratives are fueled by drama, and drama can't exist without conflict. For every victory state, there's a potential fail state, even if you're pretty sure the hero's going to succeed in the end. The threat of death happens to be one of the greatest conflicts we can encounter. While most stories have happy endings, the threat of death still compels us when we suspend our disbelief. Even if the hero succeeds, we don't know at what cost, so there's plenty of tension to be had. One story that uses this to great effect is Fullmetal Alchemist, which themes itself around the idea that the dead cannot be brought back to life. Its very premise involves two young boys failing to bring their late mother back, and their journey for atonement after realizing the mistake they've made. Because of this logic, when characters like Hughes are killed, it's incredibly emotional. Colonel Mustang's revenge against Envy, for instance, is so potent because we know Hughes ain't coming back. That said, it's also true that fiction doesn't have to be realistic. One of the things we can appreciate from escapism is that it lets us overcome life's boundaries, and one of those boundaries is indeed the permanence of death. We can be incredibly compelled by a hero's arduous journey to revive a loved one. We can admire characters who are able to survive injuries that would kill pretty much anyone else. That in itself has its own dramatic value. However, writers need to be very careful when playing with this idea, because it follows a bit of a boy who cried wolf phenomenon. Bringing someone back from the dead can be amazing, but the more you do it, the less compelling death becomes. Do it too much, and audiences will no longer care when someone dies. It's emotionally numbing to go through that tension, only to find out it was for naught. Sometimes it can even feel insulting. Take the poorly written Rise of Skywalker, for instance. For a brief moment, the film tries to tug at our heartstrings by making us think Rey's out-of-control force lightning killed Chewbacca. Oddly enough, before we really have any time to mourn his loss, it's quickly revealed that Chewie survived because he wasn't even on the same ship that blew up. I can't think of this as anything less than tasteless trolling. It just trains us not to get worked up when someone supposedly dies. This is taken to the extreme in the TV show Supernatural. The two hunters, Sam and Dean, start their journey to get revenge on the demon that killed their mother. But along the way, they each wind up dying and returning to life in various ways, such as returning from heaven, hell, and even purgatory. Almost every character who dies in that show comes back to life in some capacity, and it gets so bad that the only way they can kill off the Angel Castiel for good is to send him to quote-unquote super hell, as fans have nicknamed it. If it weren't for all the queer baiting in that show, it wouldn't have a leg to stand on. Basically, you need to be careful when subverting the permanence of death in your stories. As far as I'm concerned, it's a matter of bargaining. Absolutely do not subvert death unless it's to introduce lore and developments that are equally or more dramatic than death would have brought. In other words, make it worth the loss of permanent death. There are plenty of examples that do this right. Steins Gate, for instance, is all about using time travel to prevent people from dying. It replaces the permanence of death with the inevitability of death, as Okabe tries again and again to save the life of Mayuri. Even by slowly undoing the effects of his time travel, he realizes that without it, his beloved Makise Kurisu will die. The dramatic dilemma of him having to choose between Kurisu or Mayuri is very compelling. We don't feel cheated when Okabe finally finds a way to save both of them, because the struggle to get there was more than dramatic on its own. This leads me back to Fate Stay Night. The entire premise of its story is that mages can summon dead heroes from the past to more or less get a second chance as warriors. You couldn't have such an awesome concept without admitting that, yes, the dead can in fact return in some capacity. Someone like King Arthur can keep coming back to life over and over again, so long as people continue to summon her, meaning that even if she loses in any given Grail War, she can just fight again in the next one. That said, her fighting again and again isn't entirely pleasant. It comes with a great deal of suffering that more than makes up for the fact that she's not technically dying in these Grail Wars, making her actual death somewhat surprisingly peaceful and well-earned. So yeah, heroic spirits themselves are one way in which the Nasuverse subverts the permanence of death. There are tons of other examples though. In general, people in the Nasuverse are more than just biological machines that die when their bodies break. Any living being consists of body, mind, and soul. So even if the body dies, people can exist in other forms. Going back to Artoria, she's got the Utopia of Avalon, which serves as her eternal afterlife. Most people have their souls returned to the root when their bodies are killed, but that's not always the case. Quite a number of characters actually transfer their souls into new bodies, with different consequences for doing so. Zoken, for instance, transfers between all sorts of rotten bodies held together by the Matos crestworms and other insects. His soul remains tethered to an especially nasty crestworm attached to Sakura's heart. The longer he keeps this up, the more his soul degrades, making him lose sight of his original goals and dreams. Similarly, we have Michael Roa Valdemyong from Tsukihime. Wanting to experience eternity, he became a dead apostle with the ability to reincarnate into different hosts every time he's killed. As he continues to survive, his personality blends in with the other people he possesses, leaving very little of the original Roa that started this process. The only way to avoid these consequences is to materialize the soul so that it can exist without a body. This is what the Heavens Feel magic does, and we see it in action when Ilya preserves Shiro's soul until a puppet body can be procured. Shiro Amakusa tried to use this true magic on all of humanity, redefining what we consider being alive by having everyone just exist as disembodied souls. The word death itself isn't inherently consistent in the Nasuverse. Characters like Shiki Tono and Shiki Ryogi have mystic eyes of death perception. They see true death, the end of things existing altogether. When they cut these death lines, they basically send targets immediately back to the root. Do not pass go, do not collect 200 saint quartz. Not even folks like Roa can reincarnate if they're killed by this method. Sometimes, a person's consciousness can be duplicated, so it hardly even matters if they die. Toko Aozaki, who made Shiro's puppet body, made a fully functioning version of herself that is so accurate and lifelike that you can't tell which one is her original. Either way, there are ways of keeping people alive through magecraft. As Waver points out, people don't necessarily die just because they've been decapitated. Even a head on its own can be preserved through magecraft, and in more twisted situations, bastards like Gilles de Rais can keep his child victims alive while Ryunosuke disembowels them. Then we have straight-up immortality, like what we see with the true ancestors. Characters like Arcuade, or similarly Yume Ren, don't have a predetermined lifespan. They can still be killed, but it's extremely difficult, to the point where chopping Arcuade into 17 pieces isn't a full-on death, despite how they talk as though Shiki killed her. Her luminous body in the remake takes this to wild new levels. Dead apostles are a lot weaker, but still cling to a type of immortality so long as they continue to drink blood. Gods and other phantasmal beings in the Nasuverse are also immortal to an extent. Their blessings can be bestowed onto mortals and demigods, allowing heroes like Heracles and Achilles to be invincible or have multiple lives. All of the crazy mythology that inspires Fate has its logic of death incorporated into the lore. There's also the idea of artificial life. The moon cell has NPCs that become self-aware and are treated the exact same as if they were born biologically. Homunculi are much the same, gaining souls despite many of them being manufactured. Let's not forget about concepts like heat and life energy. In Tsukihime, we have cases where Roa stole some of Arcuade's life energy, and that energy can be used to revive her, even when she's otherwise killed. When the real Shiki Tono inverted as a child, he killed the adopted Shiki Nanaya. To save him, Akiha gave away half of her life force, some of which was stolen by Shiki Tono, resulting in all three of them having a strong connection. Like Arcuade, Akiha's safety and sanity can be ensured by returning that lost energy to her. The question I have for all of you is if these different mechanics that toy with death are at all worth spoiling Death's permanence. Between the various timelines, there's hardly any one character who dies and never comes back in some form. Is it really all that tragic seeing any of these characters die, when we know we can just summon them later, or see them on a different timeline having fun cooking food? Is the lore fascinating enough on its own that we just don't mind, or are we just good at separating one story from another without letting them spoil each other? I know that I've been pretty annoyed at Fate sometimes, especially in Grand Order, when it practically pulls new logic out of its ass to justify its narrative twists. In Atlantis, Achilles gets shot by a celestial arrow right in his only weak spot, yet somehow he's able to keep on fighting for the entire first part of the Lost Belt. Thanks to his battle continuation skill, he endures even after he's quote-unquote killed in a battle against his mentor Keiron. It's like death is to Nasu what yellow is to a traffic light, a transitionary state that can easily be exploited. Thankfully, it's not always that blasé. Take Ciel from Tsukihime. Her body is immortal, literally restoring itself after every injury. Does that mean her hymen grows back? That sucks. Anyway, when she says the church killed her over and over again, what she means is that they wounded her with what would have otherwise killed her if she weren't immortal. Technically, you're not killing her at all unless she actually dies. But that's just semantic when you consider the story is trying to convey the tremendous agony she goes through whenever people continually injure her. In that regard, the pain is worse than death, such that she actually wants to die, but can't until she's killed Roa for good. That tragic irony is plenty dramatic. In any given moment, we might not worry that she'll die in combat, but there's almost more tension from seeing her tormented. Plus, with Tsukihime, the way to kill Roa is actually well developed. If you don't slice his death lines or crush his soul, he'll continue reincarnating. We might call that a death, but seeking a way to truly kill him becomes part of the drama. Honestly, this is all really nerdy. It's like debating whether Shiki can actually kill servants. If you can literally see death, and can bring an end to all things, shouldn't slicing a death line be the ultimate attack? If so, how could Shiki ever lose? Personally, I feel the Nasuverse chucks so much stuff at us all the time that most of it will stick, but inevitably, we're bound to run into some awkward bits we'd rather just turn a blind eye to. What do you guys think? Do you like how death is handled in the Nasuverse, or would it be better off keeping death permanent? Let me know how you feel in the comments below. Before I go ahead and roll the credits, I want to give a special shout out to my $10 supporters. Video Gamer 75, Stephen Elak, Otaku Mom, Jens Ballman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Freebrick, RNG or Shuffles 1498, Crod, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Nigel, Happy, Sakura-chan, Caitlin P, and SF Giants fan Mike. Thank you all so much. Thanks for watching.
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
You can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
celebrate your fandom!